I hope everybody's doing okay. I know I haven't made one of these videos in a while. I was under poor health for about a week and wasn't feeling too good the last couple of days. But I'm using a new editing program. I should be being able to push these out a lot faster. Now, this is the eighth video, and and this is so by far the most important one put out so far, and will be the most important one to come because every single person after this um is connected to the same person, was a follower of the same person, um idolized the same person, and that was the beast himself, from born 1875, Aleister Crowley. And and people that research this understand that every occultist, any Hollywood star, um, all these cult leaders that came later, different occult writers, different people that created different magical systems, um, future political figures, um, musicians, um, painters, pretty much anybody that had success in what you would call the nominal, or the secular world, had some fascination to do with this person, because as far as being an individual, this is the embodiment of evil. And don't listen to any of these little Google um text about him, or AI trying to say that was all philosophy. It wasn't philosophy. Everything that he said in those writings, he meant. And it was not philosophy. It was all what he actually thought. Everything that he said about Christ, he actually meant. But let's get to it. His actual story. Um, just like most of these occultists, he grew up very, very well off, very privileged, um, and raised by Plymouth Brethren, which is a very strict sect of Christianity. And this was over in England. By the time he was 11, his mom was already calling him the Beast 666. Um, he exchanged his name from Edward Alexander Crowley to Aleister Alexander Crowley, so it would add up to, in Greek, Hebrew, and Kabbalah Gematria, to 666. And by the time he was 11 or 12, he was already doing horrible things sexually, sacrificing animals, and and just like anybody else, he didn't really know exactly where he was gonna go with this. I don't know at what exact point he completely gave his life over to the devil, but I believe it's earlier than people think. I believe it was probably earlier than Egypt, and probably earlier than the Golden Dawn. Um, some people will blame it on his father dying from tongue cancer, I believe it was, and his father being a pastor. I can't imagine what it would feel like to father such an abomination and an detestable person. And that for the mother, I feel for her. God rest the soul. Now moving on, he went to college for a short amount of time and got obsessed with learning forbidden magical secrets and knowledge. So for a while, he sought out a group that could give him these answers that he was looking for, and finally he met someone who I covered 2 videos ago, Samuel Adele McGregor Mathers, the creator of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and a 33rd degree Freemason, among many other things. I would recommend going back and watching the video. Um, and among many other things, Crowley as well was a Freemason, and people will argue this, just because he didn't have a traditional initiation, because he was an honorary Mason, but me and many other people that are educated in this topic will agree that he was the most celebrated Mason of all time. I would say above Albert Pike. I would say above Albert Mackey, Manly P. Hall. I would say even the founder of the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt. And people don't understand it unless they're in the highest degrees of this stuff or understand how the highest degrees work. He was far above a 33rd degree Mason because it goes higher than 33. He was initiated very fast to a 97th degree Mason, and from my gathered knowledge, it goes much further than that. And whatever is the final, he was the highest. Sources say that he had so many Masonic awards and badges that he could fill up 5 pages of a book. You don't see any other Mason with that many medals in his picture with that disgusting Masonic regalia on, and that's something that you'll continue to see in this ongoing trend. Currently, 8th person in a row that's a Mason, and I'm not making these videos to specifically go after Masonry. If that was my intent, I'll be doing video after video about the 800 different fraternities that they've set up in North America alone. But that's not really my goal, as there's only really so much you can talk about when it comes to that, and there's hundreds of other independent creators that seems to be doing their own job with that. My goal is just to dissect the lives of these individual abominations, but I find it very odd that all of them are somehow connected to the same societies, specifically Freemasonry. So he got into the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, I believe, 1898. Lasted several years. A falling out occurred. For multiple reasons. People didn't like how disgusting of a person he was at the time. He was writing some very disgusting poetry, and continued to until he died. Specifically, one of the more known ones is White Stains, or something that he wrote to be read at his funeral called a hymn to Pan, which for people that don't know, Pan is a mythological satire, goat type of creature, pretty much what the Bible speaks about in Isaiah, but in mythology it's known to be some type of demonic god that molested kids or ate kids. But anyway, so the Golden Dawn was all about the outer order and the inner order and the secret order were all about different things, but on the surface it was about learning different occult practices, like tarot, astral projection, Kabbalah, gematria, um, palmistry, and so on and so on. But what the order's actual purpose was these things held by Samuel Adele McGregor Mathers called the cipher manuscripts. And these were manuscripts that taught you how to get in contact with these things known as the secret chiefs. Which the best explanation that me or probably anybody else can give you, and the most direct, is that they're cosmic god type of creatures, kind of like things that H.P. Lovecraft wrote about. That's the most direct example that I could really give somebody. Um, so one of the other reasons they had a falling out before we get to that was the bisexual lifestyle and just how disgusting of a person he was, and a lot of people that had a word to say about this that spoke out said that he was too evil a person even for the Golden Dawn, and the Golden Dawn was known for pretty much being the most radical magical order out there at the time, at least that the public knew about. So he wasn't allowed to have whatever secret documents he sought out for. So a couple years passed, and at this point, it needs to be said that he was still pretty much a nobody at this point, other than occult circles knowing who he was. He garnered no fame at this time, and unfortunately, it didn't stay that way. In 1904, when he went on a honeymoon with his wife, his first wife, with the money he inherited, which at the time was over $5 million. Today, it probably would have been close to 10. They spent the money to spend the night of their honeymoon in the king's chambers at the pyramid. During this time, his wife, who was a medium, got possessed by what was claiming to be the spirit of Horus, and she was saying that Horus was waiting for him and telling him to go to the Museum of Cairo the next morning. And at the time, he didn't really think much of it because apparently she wasn't really a very serious practitioner of the occult. Probably just a dabbler, but sometimes that can be the most dangerous for reasons that's not worth getting into at the moment. Now you get to the next day, and while they're going through the museum, not really knowing what to look for, they walk by exhibit number 666, and there it was, the Stele of Revealing, which was this slate that had Horus on it. And at this point, I guess he realized that his wife was on to something from whatever spirit spoke through her. Now they go back to the king's to the king's chambers where they were staying at for the honeymoon. And I can't remember the month right off my head right now, but on the 11th I believe the 11th, 12th, and 13th. When they got back, he got possessed by a spirit that he claimed the name was Iwas. While he never saw this entity, he claimed that it was basically what you would call nowadays a predahuman entity that was invisible, meaning an entity of higher intelligence. And this was before we knew about the new form that the Nephilim are currently taking on, known as aliens, um, which are surely the Nephilim, the Anunnaki, the mighty men of renown, the legends of old, their spirits. Because as you see in the book of Enoch, those spirits didn't just get to go to heaven or hell. They stayed on this earth, and now they're masquerading as something different. And he claimed that this entity spoke over his left shoulder, and for 3 days dictated a prophetic text known as the Book of the Law. And when I say a prophetic text, I, I do not mean that in a good way. I say that with as much dread as I can pretty much give give from my soul, because the text pretty much predicted a modern society to where people abandon the morals of God and the morals of the Bible. And he said that do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. And there was some really horrible claims in that book, like claiming that, saying horrible things about Jesus Christ that I choose not to even repeat at the moment. And claimed that Horus would be the crowned and conquering sod of the new Aeon, and declared the upcoming Aeon as the Aeon of Horus. And that's what you've seen Hollywood promote, but they've found new ways to promote the same idea. Do what thou wilt, turn into do your own thing. You do you. I'm just doing me. You only live once. Live and let live. Mind your own business. And so on and so on. It's went through a whole bunch of different forms, but what matters is that unfortunately that is exactly what happened to this side of the world and a lot of the other sides of the world. And you see that's the agenda the music industry pushes. You'll notice him in the music industry, and more than any other industry, especially the rock and roll music. I suggest a documentary by Pastor Joe Simmel called "They Sold Their Souls for Rock and Roll." By the time you get to part 2, there should be zero doubt in your mind that the music industry, especially rock, was 100% inspired by Aleister Crowley. If you watch that and you still have denial, then you're suffering with what you call cognitive dissonance, which a lot of people seem to be having today. I would even call that a modern phenomenon. So what happened next? Well, before that, it's to be known that along with the Book of the Law, there was a whole bunch of other horrible Antichrist types books put out by him, such as Moonstyle Diary of a Drug Fiend, the Book of Lies, Masochist Theory and Practice, the Equinox of the Gods, and so on and so on. All very like I said, Antichrist type books. That's the only thing that I can have to say about it. and it doesn't matter if the book of the law was a prophetic text or not. What matters is that's exactly what direction the world went in. Now, can it go back to morals? Of course, if people decide that's the kind of life they want to live again, then of course, because obviously the law of Jesus Christ is more powerful than the law of Horus, Aleister Crowley, or Lucifer. But according to Bible prophecy, that's probably not the way it's gonna go. But before we continue, who inspired this monster? The answer lies back in my first video. Helena Blavatsky, or other known as HPB, or Madame Blavatsky, the founder of Theosophy. And then his other inspiration was Eliphas Levi, who died the same year that he was born. And a lot of people forget that these people believe in reincarnation. So he believed that he was the reincarnation of Eliphas Levi, who he had an obsession with. And these people that believe in reincarnation, they usually people that bring a satanic aspect into it, believe that it's possible to transcend a regular human being, and then you don't have to reincarnate again. And when you look at one of the other cults that he started, the AA, which translates to Silver Star, you realize that he made the claim to be the first human to transcend into a secret chief, which is kind of a disturbing thought to consider if true. But I'm not really one to dispute the claim, but I'm not one to condone it neither. So he writes these books, and just like in our last video, I talked about a very wicked man known as Theodore Russ. He gets involved with him. I explained how he got involved with him in the last video, and he becomes the head of the OTO. He starts recruiting, starts having a very big presence. And he started his own religion called Thelema, which is also a magic system. He is also the one who started the term magic with a K at the end, which is basically to differentiate between a rabbit in the hat type of magician to a black magician or ceremonial magician. I'm not gonna really talk about his particular influences in this video, because that's the whole point of this series. I'll be covering them one at a time. But once you actually study this stuff and investigate it, it's unbelievable. I had no idea how bad it actually was until I started looking into it myself. And I don't really think anybody can actually fathom how bad it actually was. Right now I want to break the claim that people say he wasn't that bad of a person. He just wanted to live his own life, and Thelema was not an evil system. It was just about being your own person. Well, if that's just really all it was, if that's all that it was about, then explain him admitting with his own mouth that he was sacrificing at least 150 kids a year, and he wrote in his own book with his, well, it might have been automatic writing, but he wrote with his own hand that a young male child of perfect innocence was the greatest victim for sacrifice. You have millions of people um, having a role model of someone that advocated human children as a sacrifice. Now, that should be the only thing that people need to take into consideration. You certainly need to consider how many people he taught to conjure up the devil, to conjure up demons, all these horrible books. That's to be enough, but unfortunately for most people, it's not. Um, a lot of people forget that he also had part in publishing the Lesser Key of Solomon, which has the Archgoetia of 72, which is pretty much the most famous magical grimoire in the modern society, which please no one go buy this, but, or don't, I would recommend not to look this stuff up either, but it pretty much showed people the easiest way to summon an entity. And I would personally argue that there is nobody since the dawn of humanity other than the devil himself, Lucifer himself, that had this much of a negative impact on the world. And usually the rebuttal to this is, how about Hitler? Now schools tell you that Hitler was the most evil person that there ever was. And don't get me wrong, he was obviously a horrible, horrible, horrible human being, and that but not only was Hitler not the real mastermind behind it, but Hitler was also heavily influenced by Madame Blavatsky, who Aleister Crowley kept pushing her system of magic theosophy, and also you need to take into consideration that Heinrich Himmler had Rudolf Hess, who was one of Hitler's men, one of his high-ranking men and astrologers, got sent over to Aleister Crowley to interrogate, and though this can't be proven, I highly believe that either Hitler and Crowley met, or Crowley and Heinrich Himmler, who was the real mastermind of the Third Reich, met, because it took so long to write letters overseas. I believe they probably just handed Rudolf Hess over to Crowley. And Crowley also claimed that Hitler was his prophet. So you have to, what's more evil? The cause of the evil? Because if Blavatsky never started this theosophy with this ascended masters thing, and this fifth root race of the 7 root races, and Atlantis and Lemuria and the Aryan race, then the Third Reich probably never would have even happened. So consider that. And now we'll get to 1917, the Avalanche working ritual. Now, what you have to realize is these people understood metaphysics at a very high level. They understood time and space a lot better than the average person, and they learned how to take advantage of that and manipulate the world through that. Kind of like how chaos magic works. And the creator of chaos magic Um, Austin Osman Spire was also a student of Crowley. There'll be a video about him coming later. And now this would be before any type of things was known about these so-called aliens. Now him and Roddy Minor, another medium that he met, did something called the Amalantra working ritual, to where they succeeded in ripping open a hole in space and time, and this was the first recorded drawing of what's known today as a gray in recorded history. Google will tell you like 1962, but no. The first recorded incident of a gray alien was when Lam walked through the portal and met Aleister Crowley. That the drawing looks almost identical to what the grays look like now. The big head, the weird little eyes, about 2 to 3 feet. And then later we'll talk about this in fuller detail later on, but the Babylon working ritual done by Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard was inspired by the Amalantra working ritual. But the difference is they claimed that they did not close the door. And right after that, in 47 is when you had this unbelievable spike in cases. And like I said, this video was pretty much as a prologue to all the rest. This was the video to build the case of how evil of a man he was, and the following videos is to build the case of the unfortunate influence that followed and is still following. Have a good rest of the night.